This message is brought to you by Apple Pay. Forget your wallet? It's all good because with Apple Pay, you can pay with a simple tap of your iPhone, the wallet you never forget, at millions of places worldwide, including websites, apps, and anywhere you see the contactless symbol. Security is built in with Face ID, so you don't have to worry about your cards getting lost or stolen. And the best part, you still earn the card rewards, points, and cash back you love. So say goodbye to the billfold, add your card to Apple Wallet, and start paying the Apple way. Terms apply.
I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk, now.
Hello, and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me in the studio, his favorite part of Canada is Milan. It's Andy Greenwald!
Oh, you did Top Chef joke.
A Top Chef joke, because we're going to talk about Top Chef for maybe the second time this season. Now that the finale has aired, Greenwald, it's great to see you. It is Monday in the United States of America.
Still, yeah.
And today on the show, we have Scott Frank, the co-creator, the writer of several of the episodes, or most of the episodes, the director of almost all of the episodes of the Netflix thriller series Department Q, starring Matthew Good. It was awesome. Andy and I broke that season down over the last couple of weeks, and we're so happy to have Scott back to chat with him about making the show.
That was great. That was big trading for Desmond Bain energy you just brought. You went all in a weak field. Facts you told me when I texted you. What's up with this trade?
I was just regurgitating Bill and Ryan. Their enthusiasm for Orlando, the Orlando Magic, not necessarily Orlando the city. Although they don't have anything against that place. It's great to see you. I know that you were traveling this weekend, so I appreciate you coming back.
Thanks. I almost didn't. Didn't seem like the time to do it. Yeah, I was out in America, Chris. I am ready to do one of those. I would say one of our favorite recurring bits in the podcast, but maybe the one with the least traction. Maybe our listeners can let us know if that's true.
Andy on the road?
No, that is zero traction. Slightly more than that is just when we reference New York Times opinion columnists, because they really are the drivers of culture, as we've learned over these last few weeks, months, and years. But our guy, Tom Friedman.
They abandoned your boy. They abandoned your boy Zoran.
Oh, they put him in they really, did you see that today?
Yeah, they were like, can't even consider putting him on the ballot.
This man does not deserve a spot on the ballot. Yeah. Do you know he's Mira Nair's son? Director of Mississippi Masala and things. I didn't know that.
I've watched a lot of his social media clips.
Oh, I've watched a lot of his mom's films. So there you go. And neither of us are New York voters anymore. So detours aside, our guy Tom Friedman used to write these columns where he'd be like, in a taxi ride outside of Mumbai, I learned that. So that was me this weekend. I took my daughters on a Father's Day weekend trip to the great state of Montana. Home of many of our favorite writers.
Yeah, of course.
Jim Crumley, Thomas McGuane, my new guy, Ivan Doiga, obsessed.
How did you find out how to pronounce that?
Googled it.
Okay.
It looks like it's Doig. And then when I say it out loud, I'm like, obviously he said it differently.
Yeah.
God damn, that guy can really write.
It'd be a tough beat if you pronounced it Doge.
Well, he'd be in the news. So I'm just here to tell you, Chris, that for as messy as this country is, it's still a beautiful place where when you're walking on a trail, just you and a bunch of tourists from all over the country clutching desperately to your can of bear spray, something I learned about 48 hours ago, you can always say, hi, excuse me, good morning. And we all get along.
Have you ever seen the TikTok or reel of like white people on hikes, and it's all white people walking, going like, hey, hi.
Literally me. But
it gets flat over there.
Or they're like, you're in for a treat when they're coming down. And my daughter's like, why do you talk to everyone? I'm like, because that's what makes this country actually great.
Yeah, they don't talk to anybody elsewhere.
No, but then I did. You were asking if I was going to pretend otherwise. No, I was. We were glamping.
Yeah,
I like bathrooms.
Must be nice.
Yeah, it was divine.
Yeah,
but
open air, like
because you're in a tent.
Yeah,
but it's just like a little.
But there's a floor.
There's 100% a floor.
Is there AC?
No.
Is there like a little unit? No
unit. And then as part, like you're sitting around after
Is
dinner.
there a fridge?
Nope. There's no electricity.
So what's the glamp part of it?
The roof and the bathroom, and then the access to delicious. I'm going to look in the camera. Delicious Montana microbrews. But like they have a thing where like you.
Wait,
sit,
where are the microbrews?
In the main, like there's a fridge.
Oh, there's a main area.
There's a main tent.
Gotcha.
It's all a tent.
Gotcha.
But they have a big tent. It kind of looks like
like the Democratic Party.
It's a big tent with just a wind going through it because there's nothing holding it together. it looks like Anne Baru and Uncle Owen's spot, like on Tatooine, like a kind of a crazy tent, except full of microbrews instead of blue milk. But they have fires, and you can.
I got that joke like 10 seconds too late. Yeah,
the blue milk one.
Yeah,
you're good. You're smiling though. I appreciate it. You could do s'mores, and then a bunch of people who are staying there around the campfire. And generally, there's a question of like, where are y'all from? That's not me talking. That's the other American, and I say Los Angeles, and that's a real conversation ender
or starter.
Not this weekend.
Really?
I'll tell you that much. All my new friends from Jacksonville, Atlanta, and other point in South Carolina did not seem there wasn't a lot of reciprocity.
Was there an SEC conference discount on coming to Montana? Or?
No, or these guys just really liked exploring America's national parks.
Sure.
As did we. But I wanted you to know that I haven't changed too much because I haven't. I'm not going to become a folksy populist. Sorry, haters. But like when I was there were a lot of hats. Like my kids were like, you should get something like
a hat.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm not actually going to be the guy that gets the cowboy hat. But I did find on our last day in the lovely town of Bozeman, where I know Kaya has been before, because Kaya and I both love this country very much. I did get this hat, and I'm very proud of it.
Ooh, a trucker hat.
It's a trucker hat, but it's a trucker hat for Dave's Sushi in Bozeman, Montana. So this is my new character with my family. They wanted me to talk about it because it was Dad's Day, but this was Dave's Day. I found out Dave, no free ads. Food is pretty good. Dave is a Jew from New Jersey who moved to Montana and was like, how about sushi? 20 years later, he's killing it.
How do you,
so
Montana,
not
adjacent to a large, fresh ocean.
No, and nor are they making nigiri out of river fish. That is not on the menu. I would say that we've done great work with refrigeration.
Good.
I would say there were a lot of cooked items on the menu. No, it was a really nice place. But I also
think his margins must be pretty thin.
You mean in terms of like spoilage?
Just like in terms of like the amount he has to pay to ship that up to Bozeman.
I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I would say we're eating the same fish at LA sushi restaurants at a certain price point that they are in Bozeman. You know what I mean? Yeah.
You don't think my guy is down
coming from San Pedro being like, oh, this snapper is looking fresh today.
That's a whole subplot of The Accountant too.
Sushi in Los Angeles?
Just a guy who's like getting like Toro, in San Pedro, but is also a human trafficker. And then Bernthal and Affleck have to kill him.
Which is more profitable for him? Where are the better margins? I wanted to sort of workshop that I feel like if things keep going the way they're going in this country, maybe Dave should become your co-host.
Why?
Dave can...
Because he's also Jewish?
My first thought was that maybe Dave wasn't, but that they were like, but Montana wouldn't accept sushi from a non-ethnic person.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, well, I can't pretend to be Japanese, so I'm going to cosplay. No, I'm like, Dave just calls it as he sees it, straight shooter, but also like would rather be floating down the Yellowstone River. Like
amongst us, yeah.
Like my boat captain, Angie.
Right.
She was from Valley Forge and found a new life out there.
Broadly speaking, we're talking about food here.
You don't want to talk about Montana anymore?
No, I'll talk about Montana for as long as you want. I wanted to get to Top Chef and I wanted to get to Scott Frank. We hadn't really talked about this season, and I think it's safe to say that early on, both of us were a bit soured by the experience. I stuck with it on a week-to-week basis, and then your boy, you, crashed in the entire season over the course of like 8 days, pretty much.
I really, really binged it, which I don't usually do.
And I think that is an interesting contrast because for me, it was interesting. You were asking me a couple of questions, and obviously we're going to do spoilers for the this season of Top Chef Destination Canada. So I would say stop listening now so we don't have to be overly sensitive about that if you haven't watched Top Chef's finale. But generally speaking, I think I was having a hard time like retaining things from week to week because I know statistically this is not true, but anecdotally it felt like they were really studio bound, that there was a lot of stage stuff. There was a lot of quick fires that never left the studio.
Let's be clear. You said statistically it might not be true. We have not done the research on this.
There is an actual website called Top Chef Stats, which I will refer to later when I talk about the winner.
Okay, good. Because anecdotally, though, I think it's worth noting because it is, like cooking, it's a lot about feel.
Yeah.
And there was a good interview, mid-season interview that you and I both read after we finished, after at least I was caught up, that Gail, Tom, and Kristen did with The Hollywood Reporter, where the reporter asked point blank, it seems like you're pretty studio bound. And they were very quick to say, no, it's exactly the same.
Yes.
It's perception.
Yeah, so it must be, yeah.
That said, I think it is safe to say that there have to be reasons why, especially the first half of the season, felt so insular and claustrophobic even. And it may have been partly that the quickfire and eliminations were studio bound. I think it may also have been the fact that the talent pool, for whatever reason, did not feel as outward looking. And now part of that might be that when you're shooting in Los Angeles, there are many world famous chefs here or passing through here, and you can bring them into studio. And when you're there, there are chefs that maybe Americans aren't as familiar with. For whatever reason, all I can say is I watched 21 seasons of this show eagerly without interruption, and then crashed out 3 or 4 episodes into the season when it was like Michael Cera and 2 Jeopardy champions. I was like,
I do have a theory about why this
anymore.
is not maybe Top Chef's fault, and they could be exactly right that they left the studio as much as they always have.
Yeah.
It might just be, and this is me getting older, that lots of cities just look alike now.
Well, especially cities that, no disrespect to our northern neighbors, Toronto famously doubles a lot for other cities.
Yeah. And you do get the feeling sometimes, like I get the feeling sometimes walking around where I'm like, there's a Joybird, there's a Whole Foods, there's a, like what is the running shoe that says BC or whatever? Or what was that running
British Knights?
What is the running shoe you have? Allbirds?
New Balance?
No.
How dare you?
When you run, what do you run in?
New Balance.
Oh, okay. I didn't think that was
free
always
ads,
the
but
case.
I would love a new pair. Are you talking about like Hoka's?
No, it doesn't
those
matter.
On?
Yeah,
O-N?
On.
On clouds.
On clouds. You always see those stores, and then there's that feeling of like the retail space with the condos above it. Like
it's everywhere.
You just start to feel like you're looking at the same thing over and over again. But
it's not like that? Livingston, Montana.
So maybe it's not Top Chef's fault, and everything is just starting to feel a little bit samey out there.
Maybe. I just feel like now. I think we're going to get a chance to talk to Gail, so maybe we can ask some more like nitty gritty questions
like
about
what's up
it.
with Canada?
No, but like I feel.
do you like on cloud sneakers?
What do you run in, Gail?
Yeah.
I think that she will take this personally, and I understand. I mean, she is a very proud Canadian, and was excited to host the show in her home country. I think that if the part of the mission of the show is to communicate the foodways, the cultural history, the enthusiasm. And really the story of a place, I think that the season failed.
Yes.
It failed in the first third. I think that when they got to Calgary, because Calgary is more specific and there were more incredible vistas and maybe they were freed up to transport fewer people out of the studio.
Yeah, they had fewer chefs.
The show came alive, and then that energy continued to the end. So I feel like I've cut you off when you were about to go on a more getting your arms around the whole thing kind of jag. Like, the show is still the show. And when I crashed out after 2 or 3 episodes, I was like, something is broken. I no longer think that's the case.
Yeah.
But there are
I think
some...
you wind up being higher on the season than I did, and I wonder whether some of it has to do with the compression of the season in just a week rather than for me week to week.
That definitely, and also, you know what, I gave up the ghost. I was like, I can't do Last Chance Kitchen this year. And that sped up my engagement as well. I think a couple things are true. One, I think like as a competition show, as a food show, I think that the fact that Top Chef for this many years has been so, not morally, but just like spiritually consistent in terms of what it values, what its priorities are, keeping things about what's on the plate for the most part. I think that the goodwill and just accumulated goodwill of the hosts, of Tom and of Gail, having been through this, having seen and mentored so many different people, and the spirit that the show always ends up in, with like people being pushed outside of their comfort zone and then given the opportunity to really fly.
Sure.
That's really, really hard to replicate in other competition shows. And it's really, really, at this point, it's hard for Top Chef not to do it, honestly. Yeah. It is a well-oiled machine in that regard. But there were other aspects that were really struggling this year, and I don't think it was about necessarily the talent, because the top talent of the season was exceptional, and we had a true superstar winner in a way that we haven't in a while that I love. But I do think it's worth asking some deeper questions about like what the show needs to be going forward, because it's hard to take in the season as a whole, whether I binged it or whether I went week to week, and think that we needed 15 weeks of it. This was the first season where I was like, honestly, cut it in half. If your budget is smaller, and I don't know if it is.
So, but do you think that
it felt like it was?
There should be, whether it's a smaller chef pool or you get the smaller chef pool and you're able to do more creative settings. I mean, like I also find sometimes, to be fair, like you get these great chefs and then you put them like in a 95-degree day making something that's very susceptible to heat or humidity. And you're kind of like, well, like, how is this a test of their culinary skill? Nobody would do this. I ultimately came away from this season saying, okay season, but a great chef emerged. And I think we can now start talking about that. So if you haven't watched the finale of Top Chef, you're going to want to stop listening now. You can skip to our Scott Frank interview. We'll also be back on Thursday, probably talking more about Top Chef. So please catch up.
What should we ask Kai to do about the part 6 minutes ago when you told people stop listening? I thought that was aggressive. It was very punk rock. You didn't say
nobody listens to me.
You didn't say like, get back for our Scott Frank interview. We'll be back. You were just like,
I said,
stop.
I mean, skip ahead. And I apologize to our producer, Kai McMullen, who has not finished this season of Top Chef and is about to have it spoiled.
No, I'm like 4 episodes behind.
Kaya,
I know.
Wait.
It's okay. Chris already ripped the Band-Aid off for me before we
asked
started.
me to just tell him. So as I told Kaya, Houston-based chef Tristan Epps won decisively with the final meal in Milan. And I thought we could talk about Tristan, but the way I wanted to start this was by reading a selection from Hunter Lewis's Food and Wine article about Tristan and about the finale. Hunter Lewis was one of the judges sitting at the final table, the final dinner serving there in Milan. And this is Hunter writing in Food and Wine. For the judges at the table, including me, it was clear by the end of the meal that no matter how good Bailey's and Schwei's dishes were, and no matter how evident their talent, Epps was cooking and competing at a different level. His third course, an exceptional riff on oxtail Milanese, likely sealed his win. To make it, Epps braised the oxtails, picked the tender meat from the bone, sauced it, and formed it into the shape of a traditional circular Milanese cut of ossobuco. He served the delicate, sticky oxtails over curry-spiced Carolina rice grits, conjuring flavors of West Africa, the Caribbean, and the American South, while also paying homage to Milan. In my 8 years of guest judging on Top Chef, I've tasted many exceptional dishes, including Melissa King's plum sauce lacquered quail and Bouteloux's blue lobster with squash and curry bisque. However, I cannot remember another dish that combined such skillful mastery of technique as Epps's, which layered flavor, texture, and storytelling. With the cameras and the lights trained on him, he transformed humble oxtail and rice, symbolic foods of struggle and uplift, into a regal dish. I mean, that is high praise.
I'll build on that. I mean, I think as a fan of the show,
layer flavor on.
I'm
top
going to
of
lacquer this particular quail. I think that Tristan has the potential to be the most significant winner of the show, maybe since the history of the show, for a number of reasons. One, he was a dead-eye competitor. Like, he was incredible to watch this season, and incredible to watch the way the true greats, who are the great competitors in the history of the show, it's Kristen, Brooke, Richard, Melissa on her All-Star season, Buddha certainly, who are just like able to use like a chess master 4D part of their brain to unlock themselves.
Did either Voltaggio ever win?
Yeah, Michael Voltaggio won. I think he won the first All-Star season. I could be wrong about that. Season 6 he won. So he had that piece, right? But like, he kept saying, I've never done this before. And then at a certain point, the other competitors were like, oh boy, we're doomed.
Yeah.
Because that means he's going to do something. I think though that to go, there are many reasons people go on Top Chef, and sometimes people go on for multiple reasons. Like, Schwei was very honest about the fact that like he felt like he had writer's block as a chef, but also his business was in trouble.
Needed the money,
and he was in debt. And that's true of anyone in honestly any profession in 2025, but particularly in the food and service hospitality industry. But Tristan, one of Tristan's missions, as he said repeatedly, was to advance African-American foodways and culture, and tell a larger cultural historical story about migration and appetite and throughout not just America, but like continents, right? Throughout the larger world. We've seen chefs with cultural missions before, and they've done beautiful work expanding what's possible. Like when Chef Eric Adjepong was on and he started to bring in African ingredients that I think were new to even some of the judging panels in ways that were really exciting. Tristan built on that and built on what like Gregory Gourdet did, who was a guest judge in the finale, and took it over the top and won with these dishes. You know, what Hunter Lewis was saying about the humble oxtail being like the star of the dish at this Michelin-starred spot in Milan, I think is really significant. And he's also at the age that he is and camera ready the way that he is, I think that he could do something with it. Because honestly, the show is just good. And people have very different ideas about what they want to do when they have an opportunity to do something in food. Like when Brooke Williamson won her season, I think she won an all-star season. She came back. She lost to Kristen and then came back
lost to Kristen and came back and won.
I don't think it wasn't an all-star, but she came back.
Kentucky? Was that
No,
Brooke?
I think Kelsey won Kentucky.
Oh.
But she did come back and win. When she was on both times, she had restaurants, right? She was a success in the field. Now she's much more successful as a television cook. No shame on that. Running restaurants is really hard, but that's how she's chosen to use the rocket boost that it gave her. Melissa, who won like one of the most stunning runs we'd ever seen, is still, think about that lacquered quail. I don't think she's cooking in restaurants. When I follow her on social media and she's just like, paid partnership, trip to Australia.
Right.
I don't knock it.
Well, restaurants are hard, man.
Restaurants are brutal.
Ask Dave of Dave's Sushi.
Listen, Dave's crushing it. 20 years in Bozeman, slinging fish.
Elbow to elbow in there.
I mean, I think he's got 2 other restaurants too. He's got a lovely line of merch.
Yeah.
I'll be back. But or even like Buddha, right? Who is a genius at what he does and then like there's some sort of caviar stand that he does, caviar counter that he does in New York.
He doesn't have a place in New York?
He doesn't have like his signature restaurant, like because that is kind of limiting when you have the potential fame that Top Chef can give you. All this is to say, Tristan is capital H him in a way for the show and for the moment in a way that we haven't seen in a while, and it was awesome. It was also funny to see them try to wring drama out of a finale that was basically fait accompli as long as no one screwed up.
Well, okay, so just another note on Tristan. I'll just throw some, these are from topchefstats.com. I did not do this work myself, so I didn't want to take credit here. So Tristan won 2 quick fires and 6 eliminations for 8 wins total, including 2 with immunity. So where other chefs might be like, who gives a shit? I have immunity. He's still going out there and crushing. He also was on the winning Restaurant Wars team despite a personal tragedy that he was dealing with where his father passed away literally moments before Restaurant Wars starts. Am I right?
So they're doing prep the day before, and the producers pull him out saying there's an emergency. I guess there's, families can do that if necessary. And he's told that his stepfather has had a stroke and is in a coma. And then when we rejoin the show, the day of, he's been told that his father passed away overnight.
Yeah.
And he chooses to continue.
Yes, and wins. Remarkable performance. And like he also, Hunter Lewis wrote about that final meal and he talked about the oxtail. It seemed like the shrimp toast was one that instantaneously, like the guy he brought back to cook with him was like, you're going to have to mass produce these. Like this will never leave your menu now. It's just awesome that a major talent emerged on the show. And I think it's regardless of like your criticisms of like, they did this too much or like, like I'm tired of watching Chipotle challenges. Like he's just a major talent and Top Chef is still a place that can be a platform for
the last 6 episodes of the season went to a different level. And I think that there was an episode, I think was it the last episode of the Calgary episode where
the pancakes one?
No, the foraging episode.
Oh yeah.
The foraging episode, I think, goes in the Top Chef pantheon along with, I always reference this, like in the first All-Star season, there was the episode where like each chef was asked to cook the story of their family's journey to America.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my God, look what you can do with food as storytelling on television. I thought this was similar in the sense that, we're finally understanding something that is indigenous and specific to this place, and every chef found their way into it, and the way that Shuai won that was really moving. And the other thing that I think needs to be celebrated about the show is that the emotion is really genuine. Like Tom can be crusty, and
Kristen's definitely brought that.
I think Kristen excels as a host. I think she's been a phenomenal choice for the show. She's fully comfortable in her second season and fully comfortable embracing
being vulnerable.
Being vulnerable. And I went through this, and like she was even crying when they had to eliminate Massimo, which I did not expect. So I think that the fact that the show is able to just revert to itself, even in the face of like corny-ass Mission Impossible challenges, is wonderful. I think the question that I keep asking, and we'll just have to ask Gail directly, I think, is like, regardless of, we're not going to like, okay, what's your budget? What's it going to be going forward? But can they still execute a show at this level at the size that it is?
Mm-hmm.
Because compared to past seasons, even ones that I think were ultimately weaker seasons, I just found the first 3, 4, 5 weeks so much less compelling. And I think they were pretty decent chefs this season. I think it was a pretty good group of contestants. But something about them running around that claustrophobic studio, being told they were in Canada, and in Canada we like these desserts. I'm like, okay, I think most people like desserts.
Yeah.
You know? I didn't think that was particularly a northern tradition. That was tough. So maybe in a way, like Wisconsin is a better choice, even if they're looking for tax breaks or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, because just keep telling me about these fish fries.
Did they do Wisconsin?
Yeah, that was last season.
That was last season, right?
Yeah. That was a wild one. Do you have any other thoughts about, so like a finale in which it's kind of obvious what's going to happen as long as no one screws up?
I was going to say that they tried
that.
to kind of make it seem like there's a moment in the finale where Tristan is making 2 fishes.
Yes, they made this. This was the huge thing.
And he's like, I'm just going to kind of like, I feel like I don't want to say they cherry picked. I feel like Tristan was leaning into, I'm probably so good that I can make some decisions in the moment that are going to still be winnable dishes.
Yeah.
And winning dishes. And so there's like a deliberation of whether he's going to do monkfish or cod, right?
I believe.
Or bacalao. I can't remember.
No, it was monkfish or I think or cod. It was another.
And he goes
whitefish.
with the monkfish, but like for a second you're just like, oh my god, like is he gonna? It's still in the roast. It's still steaming. Like is he gonna make it to the plate? And it's like not only did he make it to the plate, there was one person who was like the fish was a little under or overdone. I can't remember, but like you can tell by the reactions of these people. There's one guy who, when he had the shrimp toast, I think he was like, I'm speechless. And you're like...
It was the host of the restaurant. It's like, I take my hat off to.
Yeah, and if that's happening, you're kind of like...
The worst criticism was Richard Blais being like, this dessert is interesting, but is it delicious? The answer apparently was yes. But he's good. But Richard is awesome on TV.
He's good at TV, yeah.
I generally, and I know this goes against like reality show, general like consensus thinking, but like, I think it's better for the show, and it's just more engaging when everybody does a good job.
Well,
but
I think it's a different thing. So you mentioned that Hollywood Reporter mid-season interview, and there's a note in there, I can't remember which one of the hosts says it, that they don't live together anymore.
Yeah, since
the chefs
pandemic.
Do no longer share like a giant townhouse or whatever they would do.
So we don't see these shots of them like wearing their like white tees, doing their yogas together.
But all together and cooking together and probably getting on each other's nerves at the end of the day. And all the hosts sort of discuss that this is not like a reality show.
Yeah, they hate that.
That wrings drama out of interpersonal issues that the chefs have because somebody didn't flush the toilet or something like that. And I think that if you embrace Top Chef as something in between, it's not Beat Bobby Flay. It's not like a pure competition show, but it's not a traditional Bravo reality show. It's something kind of like, it's just a celebration of food. And yeah, like some of the tests might be a little bit silly and some of the tests might be mind-blowing and some of them might not seem germane at all. Like, but if you can kind of just use it as like a way to find out, I mean, honestly, this show has introduced me to a lot of things that I don't think I would ever have tried, ordered, sought out if it hadn't been on Top Chef. So in that way, it's really a palate expanding experience rather than any easy to peg television competition, reality, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think they're right. Like in that Hollywood Reporter thing, I think they're feeling themselves a little bit like they've accomplished a lot over a long period of time, and they know how to do this. And I think they're right to be that confident. There are many. I haven't checked out the Jose Andres show, like Yes Chef, and then there's a Padma show coming on CBS.
Yeah.
I don't think they're competing against Top Chef. I think Top Chef is what it is and is an industry unto itself. And I think that's ultimately a good thing. The final grouping was pretty, I think, correct. It tends to work out that way.
Yeah.
I thought Cesar probably should have been actually in the finale. I must confess I didn't really understand Bailey's journey because she ended up being someone who didn't do great, excelled at Last Chance Kitchen, and then was fine enough to kind of make it to the very end. I don't think she won anything after coming back. She just didn't lose.
But it's hard to tell because Tristan's in the competition, so I don't know what's coming in second all the time, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So the only other thing that I wanted to say that from that THR piece that I thought was really interesting was, you know, Tom's a little unfiltered these days, and he lays out something that I thought was really interesting, which is he says he's been pushing for an early competition where they do their mise en place, meaning the chefs actually, as part of a challenge, prepare all of the essential things that chefs need that they don't have day of, whether that's like chopped mirepoix or more likely things like, you know, stocks and bases of flavor that you can just pull on. Like if you're in a restaurant kitchen and you need chicken stock, like a prep cook or maybe the chef himself has done that. And you're using your homemade stuff to fortify. You're not grabbing the branded content here to pour into it, you know, or necessarily
My
chopping
Mission
everything
Impossible
on the
chicken
day.
stock.
Exactly. And his idea was that they do that, and then they have it, and then when someone gets eliminated, the other chefs can raid the pantry of the eliminated chef. And I'm like, that's fantastic. That is a part of cooking that the show actually hasn't ever really engaged with or felt like it had time for. He's an executive producer. I feel like if you're going to get smaller and more granular, I would rather it be about the work required to cook this food as opposed to the work required to transport 12 chefs to a food hall somewhere outside of Toronto. So they could be like, oh, they have Jamaican patties here too. You know, like that felt less tangible to me. So rather than feel diminished, I'd rather than pivot.
My last thing is that over the years I have at times been like Last Chance Kitchen is more exciting than the actual show. As you mentioned, it felt more elaborate, not bloated, but like you cut out Last Chance Kitchen from your diet. Is that because you didn't feel like it was essential to understanding the show? Because ultimately, like,
I mean, I think, and this is something I never thought I would say about Top Chef, because in addition to the reasons I liked the show, it was kind of a palate cleanser in my TV watching. Like, it's just I don't really watch a lot of reality or competition shows. This time, when I decided to catch up, it really was about completism. It really wasn't about, oh, I'm interested in this person. I hadn't really found Tristan in the mix yet when I dipped out. So I was just like, I'm just gonna grind this. I'm gonna get through this. And it just didn't feel essential or interesting, because it turns out if you don't watch Last Chance Kitchen,
it's okay,
and you watch episode 9 and they're like, the door opens slowly and then someone that just left the week before walks in and they're all like, oh my God, it's not actually that thrilling or exciting. And again, I think it's also the lack of place. I just felt like they were just in this studio.
Yeah.
And that studio wasn't that compelling. Do you think that I, or maybe we, are carrying into this conversation the larger specter of like nothing shoots anywhere anymore except elsewhere, and that, like, you know, Rob Lowe shooting the game show in Ireland in Dublin, in a hangar for 2 weeks? Like, are we bringing some of that mentality to Top Chef even when it doesn't necessarily deserve it?
I just think it's been a minute. I think the LA season and then the miracle of pulling off Portland loom pretty large in my mind, and that the last couple have not popped. You know, so when was there? Was a global season?
There was the World All Stars was 20. That was Padma's last season, and then last year was Wisconsin.
And that was where? London?
That was in London, but with the chefs who had been the winners of the regional.
So that obviously stood out. But I don't know. I just feel like it's hard. I mean, like, I think about this a lot with the way people have been talking about the NBA finals, where it's like, are we sure like mid-market teams should be in here? You know, like I think it's hard to leave well enough alone. And it's much easier to be like how we'd fix it than it is to just sort of like be like, Top Chef is a constant in my life. I will just keep watching it. Yes, I felt like a lot of the early episodes just sort of blended into me.
Yeah. I think that I'm really glad I finished the season because the show.
I don't know what we would have talked about today.
This
honestly.
would have been a really slow day. I would have told you about what I ordered at Dave Sushi. Whether ordering sushi.
Ice cold Sapporo at Dave's?
No, Chris, great question. They had a local Montana beer made in the style
rice
of
lager?
like a rice lager. It was called New Hokkaido. It was great.
Love that.
It was great.
Love that.
Walked in, they were like, "Happy Father's Day." I was like, "Thank you." Then they handed me the beer. I was like, this is great. This is the greatest day of my life.
Did you put in your reservation, it happens to be Father's Day?
Oh, I did make a reservation.
Yeah.
You're
a big Dad's Day guy. Father's Day guy.
It's a great day.
Yeah.
It's a great day, especially in the middle of America, heartland, where I belong. No, I'm glad I finished this season because the show doesn't need to justify its existence, but I was like, but it made a strong case for why it is still valuable, entertaining.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's an overused word, but I do think it is kind of important still for food culture. And I really appreciated that it got there, but I do think it's interesting to discuss the shortcomings at the top of the season. And I'm looking forward to a chance to ask someone involved in it how they feel about it and what they are attempting to do as they pivot forward.
Speaking of pivoting,
Yeah,
let's pivot
this is what you do.
to old Scott Frank. So Scott Frank obviously has been on the show a couple of times. We'll just get into our interview with him. We've talked a lot about Department Q in the past, so we don't really need to set that up.
I would also say we don't really spoil it. We just talk about a lot of details from the show. So if you were interested in Scott's perspective
we certainly don't give
adapting,
away the end. So if you're midway through, it's a perfectly suitable interview. And Scott talked a lot about like the streaming landscape and just like his process, which I find so fascinating.
Also, he completely changed the story of the book, which we're ignorant of, but was really interesting to hear because it also sounds like in classic Scott fashion, he took something that he didn't feel was dramatically compelling and then created something so much more complicated.
But was it too compelling?
Well,
let's get into our interview with Scott Frank. We'll be back on Thursday with some more Top Chef, hopefully, as well as checking in on a couple other shows.
Also, Kaya's restaurant reviews from Bozeman. I feel like she was a little silent, so you have a couple days to...
Great diner scene there in Bozeman.
Oh, see, I'm kind of a sushi guy, but that's just Dave.
Thanks for listening. Scott Frank is joining us for, I believe, the fourth time on the Watch podcast. He was here for Godless, for Queen's Gambit, for Monsieur Spade, and now we are here to talk about Department Q. Scott, thank you so much for coming back, man.
A four-timer. Thank you for having me. I love coming on this show. You guys are a lot of fun.
Scott, we should just have you on for holidays. I feel like it doesn't need to be tied to major projects you've worked on.
I think that's right. Every Purim, I'll come on and we'll have a special show
Every
together.
Purim and every military parade. We can have
every
Scott
military, which are going to be more often, I think, now.
I can't wait.
Yeah, you'll be
Scott,
seeing a lot of me.
I think I know the answer to this broadly, and you've talked about Department Q in the background of some of our previous conversations as a thing you were developing, working on, getting ready to shooting. Can you give our listeners just sort of like a broad outline of like how you got involved in this project and what it was that enticed you about it?
This is a strange one because about 15 years ago, the author, UC Adler-Olsen, gave me the rights to the books, just kind of a handshake, just said, you can do what you want with them. I don't think he was particularly fond of the adaptations that had happened up to that point.
Some feature films, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
And, none of which I've actually seen, so I can't judge them one way or the other. There may have also been a series at one point. I don't know. But he gave me the rights to the books and said, do what you want. And I never intended on either writing them or directing them. And I thought, I love these books. I would love to sort of see them through and see what happens. And we tried at one point. There was a version we tried where we were going to set it in, I think, Boston or Seattle or somewhere with a ferry. And Vancouver, who knows? But it didn't work out.
I thought you meant Narnia, by the way, when you said somewhere with a ferry. But maybe that's the age of my daughters. Please go on.
Yes, that's what I meant. And so it just didn't work, and not for lack of trying or lack of good people trying. I never really figured it out. And to be honest, I don't think I had the proper level of focus. And then a few years ago, I'm in Berlin prepping the Queen's Gambit, and Rob Bullock, who's a producer at Left Bank, gives me this call and says, I hear you have the rights to these books and you haven't done anything with them. Why? And because we love them and we'd love to do something. And I said, I don't know why. He goes, well, how about if I help you? And so, and he flew to Berlin to meet and talk. And I thought, wow, the guy flew over for a lunch just to talk about the books. And I'm going to let him see what he can do. And so the idea was, I said, let's find somebody I can mentor to write them, and and you'll shepherd them, and we'll see what happens. And two things happened that were significant. One, he sent me a few pictures of Edinburgh, which I loved. And we went over there, and literally you just get out of the car and you look around and you go, okay, I want to be here on film. You point the camera that way, that's beautiful. You point the camera that way, that's beautiful. You really can't go wrong. And so, and then the other significant thing that happened was the writer's strike, because I'd spent a year working with this lovely writer named Chani Lakhani, who was working on the first episode. And then, and she was a newer writer. And so the goal was to sort of bring her along as we went. And then the strike hit and I couldn't work with anybody. And they kept writing in London because they could write. And we had sold the show to Netflix, the British division, which is still part of the overall mothership, but it's their own
sort of Netflix's
satellite.
Department Q, as it were.
Yeah. Exactly, and very successful. Really, really successful. They've had some amazing shows. Adolescence, Black Doves, just one after another came from over there. I think even Baby Reindeer. I may be mistaken, but anyway, strike ended. The scripts weren't done. We couldn't cast it, and so it turns out that I'm a bit of a control freak, according to my wife. And so I ended up just saying, okay, if we're going to do this, I promised Netflix that I wouldn't waste their 40 million pounds, which is a lot for them for a show. And so once I started pulling at the threads, I just kind of ended up, I was only going to direct 2. Then I ended up directing most of them. And then I was just going to rewrite the first 2. And then I was rewriting while we were shooting. I was literally, as I keep saying, building the airplane while we were flying it. I would get up at 5 a.m. I would write for a couple hours and shoot for 10 hours and then write for another hour at home. And so it was nuts. I didn't finish the whole season until a couple weeks before we wrapped.
Scott, can you trace that aspect of your personality a little bit? Because, we've talked to you before. We've talked about your screenwriting career, which is well known and celebrated, and then also the lesser known, although a little bit more exposed in that great New Yorker profile. You're, coming on and doing some reworking, script doctoring stuff. This recent part of your career has been more auteurish with you writing and directing. So it's surprising to hear you say that you were surprised that you couldn't half-ass it, so to speak, that you felt the need you had to jump in there. Did that surprise you?
Yeah, it did. I'll tell you what surprised me is how much I was, when we were making the deal to do this, I kept saying emphatically to the agent and the lawyer, I am just a non-writing executive producer, non-writing, non-directing. I am just going to, help this show happen and that's it. That's all I'm going to do. And then I thought I would be kind of miserable and bitter and angry that I had to do it. I had to work on it. And what surprised me more than anything was how much I loved it, how much fun I had making the show, how much I enjoyed it, how creatively interesting it was for me. Despite some of it was familiar territory for me, I had a ball. So that was the surprising part.
What was the itch that this particular project ended up scratching? Because you've talked so well in the past about, you loved Westerns. And when you got to do Godless, you poured everything that you love about Westerns into it. You have, as you mentioned, you've done beautiful work in mystery, crime, noir, Walk Among the Tombstones, one of the great modern noirs, I think, still. So this did touch on some of those things. But what was it that made this special made this special and lovable for you?
So the procedural. I love procedurals. I love British procedurals in particular. I love all of them from any country, but the British procedurals in particular, I really enjoy. Happy Valley, Broadchurch, going back to Prime Suspect, because what I like is a genre. I realize I like working in a genre that's familiar. And embracing what you said about Godless, taking every trope in the Western and just leaning into it And what this was for me was to just not reinvent anything, but just take all of those tropes and try to do them really well, because I like that. I love movies like that. And I felt like this would be the perfect vehicle for that, rather than try and do, because there's nothing original about this. The cold case, the grumpy cop, take your pick. There's any number of things you could pick apart in terms of originality on this show. But what was really fun for me was getting to do all that. I wanted to do those tropes, to play in that sandbox.
You mentioned the difficulties in casting coming out of the strike. I was curious, does that mean people's availability, or were you having a hard time finding Mork? And what was it about Matthew that sort of leapt out? Because this is a little bit against type for him.
It is, although not for me with him, because in The Lookout, he played a bank robber, thug, a Kansas City thug, Yeah. And in Godless, there was a scene in Godless that I cut at the very end. There was a coda that it turned out we didn't need. He was terrific, and he played a sheriff. He played Jack O'Connell's brother in California.
So you've always seen the bad in him. That's so beautiful.
Oh, yeah. And the first time I met him, he showed up. It was right after Match Point, and I remember Marcia Ross, the casting director on The Lookout, saying, Matthew Good is in town. I go, he's like a posh boy, I just saw him match. He's not right for this. And he showed up, hung over, his head shaved, in a leather coat and some T-shirt, and he was the guy. He was just the guy. In fact, I knew he was the guy so much that it was down to him and like Jeremy Renner. I'm trying to remember, I think, for the role. Wow. And we did one more audition. We brought them both back, and Matthew tanked his audition. And I so knew he could do it that I said, let's bring him back one more time. Something was wrong. Something he didn't, I know this guy can do it. And we brought him back, and he nailed it. And so that was how that happened. And he was amazing in that role. It's like Michelle Dockery. Everyone thinks she's Lady Mary. Yeah. But she's not. She's absolutely
But wait, you
not.
did this with Dan Stevens too. In Welcome to the Tombstones. You see the devil in these posh bastards. It's awesome.
We all see footmen and butlers, and he sees them as New York stars.
It's like They Live sunglasses for this.
Yeah. But that's the most fun part of casting. Jeff Daniels playing the bad guy, or I think about Henry Fonda in Once Upon a Time in the West. That's when it's really interesting, when they can do it. Sometimes they can't do it, but these guys, they're all great actors. They can all do it.
So Matthew is incredible in this, and I also want to know where his sweaters came from. And but that we can do that off air. But he plays the part so beautifully, and I wondered because you said you love doing the broken cop, the genius who's too good at what these are tropes. These are familiar. This is a type.
Island of Misfit Toys squad. Yeah.
Absolutely. Which is how I pitched it.
Oh, yeah.
That was literally what I said to Nick.
So other than doing it so expertly, what is it about your version of Mork that makes him your version of this type of trope? What did you want to imbue him with that sets it apart?
I thought it would be funny, or interesting at least, to write about a man trapped. He is stuck in this place. He doesn't want to be in Scotland. He married this woman who was Scottish, and then she abandoned him and her 16-year-old kid. So he's left with her kid. He can't leave because he can't leave this kid, which I thought would be a clue as to who he really is. I thought that would be really interesting. And so he's now stuck in Scotland, and he's trapped, and Merritt's trapped in this other thing. And I just thought this idea of not being able to run from who you are, I thought that, we'll play it on the surface as, he's cantankerous, he's all those things. But down below, he's underneath all that, he's stuck. And I thought that would be really, and this case starts to free him up. How can he kind of, it's not that he's so isolated from people, it's that he's just trapped.
When we had Tony Gilroy come on and talk about Andor over the last couple of years, he could not talk enough about the bench of character actors that you can pull from the British stage scene and the British TV scene. everybody from Kate Dickey especially jumped out at me in this series, but
yeah, but Shirley Henderson.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm like,
Shirley
she's going to be a
Henderson.
villain. No, she's just going to be lovely. What?
She's just going to be sweet. She's going to,
but there's just this huge, deep reservoir of talent that you're able to apply to like the roles big, small. You can throw red herrings, you can have misdirections with them, but can you talk about like the essential quality that these actors seem to have, which is this facility with whatever genre you throw at them, they bring a kind of like believability to it.
Believability and specificity, even if it's different than what they've done before. They understand the assignment. And the best actors, I think they can't be, they're not playing just anybody. You feel like they're the only person who could play that role, and the cliche is to say they inhabit the role, but it's not that. It's something deeper than that. And all these actors, Mark Bonner, the new actors too, like Leah Byrne, who plays Rose, she's tremendous. Alexei Manoroff, all of them are really great, but you kind of cast because there's the type, they're the right type in a way, down deep that they're going to vibrate to the rhythm. They're going to be in the same key, however you want to put it. But they also have this instinctive facility to pay attention to the text in a way that they're playing a specific character, as opposed to an attitude or a type, or a lot of American actors sometimes, they're being themselves.
Can I ask you a practical question on top of that? So let's take an actor like, and I hope I'm saying his name right, Jamie Seavis, who plays Hardy.
Yes.
So he's phenomenal. And the type of phenomenal that he is in the show is such a slow burn because we don't get very much of him. And then we see him isolated from the rest of the cast, so that every time we see him, it's laying a little, one stone on a longer path of the character. As the writer of the scenes and then as the director of the scenes, how much work are you doing to make us fall in love with him and understand him? And how much of that is the performance? And how do those three pieces work in concert to end up where that's basically the last shot of the series? We're
when he's getting in.
Oh my God. And it's a joke, but it's heartwarming and you've earned it. So, sorry, I ended with a compliment when I meant to end with a question. But the writing, the directing,
That's
and the acting
you can always
on that
end
character.
With a compliment.
We call that the classic Greenwald.
The classic Greenwald. I'm curious, but I'm just so happy. Anyway, the way those three elements work in concert to get that character from not an afterthought, but someone we're not tracking to where he is at the end.
Good question. I'm not sure I even know. I'm not sure I'm even thinking about it as I'm doing it, because so much, it's all storytelling, the acting, working with the actors, shots, everything for me, I source to the story, telling the story. I mean, there are times I'm on the set and I've been, we've been shooting for an hour with a particular setup and I'll say, no, I'm telling the wrong story. I've just made a mistake. This is wrong. We're not. It's on me. I'm sorry. This isn't the right story. So same with everything is story. And so, in the script, I knew that ending, by the way, before I started writing the second episode. I just had this idea that I thought would be great because I knew I didn't want him in the books. It's a little different. I think he's not walking in the books, certainly not by the end of the book. Rose really isn't in the first book as much, but I realized what would be great is if he were engaged in the mystery and solving the mystery. I thought that would be really interesting. But to answer your question, it's gut. It's trial and error. You're writing and through editing and in the moment when you're with the actor and you're telling the story and you're what you're really doing as a director, if you have great actors, is you're not telling them how to act. Occasionally there's a more of this or a less of that or whatever, but really you're reminding them of where we are in the story. Mm-hmm. You're really reminding them of that. And then they know how to perform that. And with him, I wish I had a better answer. I just kind of feel I just make mistakes and it's wrong until it's right. That's really my philosophy. I don't outline. I don't do any of that. I don't plan, because anytime I plan or outline, it goes off the tracks. So for me, it's just getting comfortable with it being wrong until it's right.
I asked this question to Jesse Armstrong the other night when I was doing an event with him, but I think I want to ask you about the same thing, which is, are you ever on set as Scott the director and you learn something about yourself as a writer when you're shooting something. Like, do you find yourself cutting more on set or cutting as you go into a day of shooting, or are you ever mad at the writer version of you when you're setting something up?
Yeah, I'm always mad at the writer version of me because I sometimes think, okay, the writer was lazy because now what am I supposed to do with this?
Right.
It's very general. And I try now to remember that when I'm writing, to be mindful of the director, because on the day I have to shoot this. So I'm going to be as specific as I possibly can, not in terms of shots, but just in terms of what's going on, to not be too general and to really make sure there's enough. They're bite-sized pieces that fit together, because I am always editing on the set. I don't do a lot of coverage. I always know how I'm going to cut something. I don't do things just to have options, because I find once you start using those options, you start to leave the road that was this, your intention, this planned intention. And once you start, well, you could do this or do that, then you give yourself these alternatives that you then take, and there becomes a kind of visual or tonal inconsistency. So I don't want to give myself so many outs. And sometimes I'm in the cutting room and I wish I had a different option, but I know how I'm going to cut. I'm telling everyone how I'm going to do it. I may change this or that, but I learned, and I think I've said this to you guys before, I learned that the art of making something, or the effort to make something simple, I think results in a more elegant and clear, what the rules are when you do that. Whereas when you're kind of open the door to everything, it makes directing harder because everything's possible. When you have these rules for yourself, suddenly it makes the decision making so much easier.
On the topic of your direction, which is really beautiful in this series, there's a shot that's the compliment. The question's coming now. In the second episode, and you may have heard us talk about this, there's a shot that is almost casually low-key brilliant and stunning, which is in the church when Mork goes to visit the cop who had investigated the Merritt disappearance initially, and now he's in a different phase of his life. And you have the light coming through the stained glass, and it looks absolutely beatific. But it's not in the way of the story. The story is moving forward, and it's just something casually beautiful to look at. I'm wondering if you could use that shot as a way to describe how you've grown as a director in terms of shooting something, finding beauty where you find it, but always telling the story first.
I remember on the set of Minority Report, Janusz lined up this shot. It was in the greenhouse with Lois Smith, and she was wearing this mesh hat. And he lined up this gorgeous overhead shot, shooting through the mesh brim to her hands at the table she was working on. And I remember Steven Spielberg saying to him, "It's too arty. It has nothing to do with anything." And that stayed with me forever, because the shots have to be both. They have to be a shot for a shot's sake. Like a lot of times with oneers, sometimes I'll see a one. Why did you do that? And sometimes it's really amazing. It has a real effect on the story. Everything has to be sourced to storytelling. And I think when I started early on, and this is something Steven Soderbergh slapped me for, there was a lot of "look, Ma, I'm directing." And now I feel like, again, the simpler is better. And if I'm using fewer shots, it's not that I'm not moving the camera, but if I'm trying to really just cut when I need to cut, make sure that the punctuation is powerful. Like, how many times have you seen close-ups overused, and so they lose their power, But if I'm just sort of cutting to the story, punctuating when I need to punctuate, then you focus more on composition. So every shot, you're really focused on how much story can you tell in the frame while it's happening. And so you don't want something like light in the window to overwhelm everything else that's happening. It becomes part of everything that's going on in that story. It becomes something that you might lean into, but you're not aware of it happening. And I feel that way about wardrobe. I feel that way about the palette overall, texture, pattern, all that stuff. Because of my own OCD and what have you, all of that stays with me. And when I'm, lining up a shot, where people are in the frame and the tension of them being more to this side or that side, and then what is happening behind them, or maybe you don't see anything behind them. I mean, in Godless, 90% of that was a 25 millimeter lens because I wanted all this story in the background, and it's different for everything. So what I've learned is how much story can you tell in one shot? If you have a still of that shot, is there story being told? And then what that does is it activates the production designer and the costume designer. Everybody begins sort of thinking about designing to tell a story instead of, look, Ma, I'm designing.
Okay, so then on this directing road we're taking, I have a question where, in this series, there are essentially, there are many detectives, but there are two main detectives. There's Mork and then there's Merritt. Merritt in and of she's sort of investigating her own life and her own possible culpability and her own kidnapping and everything. And that visually is much different. You shoot it in a different aspect ratio, I think. And then also is very claustrophobic intentionally, but also has these, her flashbacks, her reveries, like the experiences that she's going through physically. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you approached Chloe in this very enclosed area? What was it like? I assume you built a set, but what was going into creating the world of this person's isolation and captivity?
Most of it has to do with, I think, writing more than directing, because we didn't have a lot of options in there. And that the hyperbaric chamber, actually, you could open it, but it would take too long to open it and to do that. And so I just thought, let's all experience it together. And so the way we shot, a lot of it was, yeah. I mean, Chloe Peary, what a lovely trooper. We had a a like 50-foot crane that could go in and out of there. And the camera was on this arm that she would sometimes she'd be acting with this huge, jib arm that's coming in and out of the chamber and moving with her. And then we would cover it. There would obviously be tighter coverage or things, but with handheld stuff, really, for really tight different things. But mostly that's how we covered it. And there aren't a lot of options, because we would also reshoot every scene where we needed to with the CCTV cameras that we had that were real and working. And so we would run the scene. We may move them a little bit, to get a better angle on something. Sometimes we'd have a GoPro in there and use that as the CCTV and put it in a little place. But mostly we were trying to keep it to have the camera feel like she does. That was what I really thought we would do. And if I had to think the way she had to think, the shots that came out of that were much more interesting than shots we could shoot by blowing out the walls or doing things like that. But the writing part was the harder part, was her having to solve the mystery of her life, because cold cases are by their very nature past tense stories. And then there's a past tense story to the past tense story, which bothered Andy, I know.
No, this is exactly, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I had it all teed up. Let's talk about this, because
backstory.
Well, I think it doesn't bother me. I'm impressed by it, honestly, because this is a huge challenge for any writer, including one as esteemed as yourself. So you very kindly in an email to us suggested that we read the books before we talk to you, which, I know I did.
Just one
I'm
book.
assuming Chris
Just
did
one
as well.
book.
No, we will. We love books. But we didn't get to it in time for this conversation. But the mystery that is being solved in season 1 of Department Q is extremely internal, as you said. It's Merritt's own it's her memories, it's her experience, and it's based in the past. This is unbelievably challenging. So could you talk to us and refute me and my criticisms about it? How you tackled it? Okay.
I can't refute you because you're not. And Tony yesterday was giving me a hard time.
That sounds like Tony.
Yeah, giving me a hard time saying, dude, next time, less backstory. I said, you and Andy, you can sit down and you can bond over this. He said, yeah, oh my God, I got a headache just thinking about all that backstory. And I couldn't argue, I had to laugh. But I would say...
Can you imagine, Scott, how short the Tony Gilroy podcast would be? Dude, do it faster. End of episode.
End of episode. That's it. Done. Done. But what I wanted to do in the book, the reason why she's there is this. In the book, these two people go through all this effort to hold her prisoner for 4 years because of something that happened when she was 11 years old. She and her brother were in a car with their parents, and they were all very happy in the car. And they passed another family who were miserable and poor. And they looked in this car and they saw these people and they were distracted by these happy people, and they got in a horrible car accident, and they wanted this little girl, now grown up, to pay for it.
Whoa. That's different.
Yeah.
That's different.
Yeah.
It's now I probably oversimplified, but that is basically the gist of this chance encounter is what started everything. And I thought, I've done the women in peril thing, and I wanted to do something where she should be in for something that wouldn't even occur to her, because she sees it in a totally different way than they see it. When she finds out what it is, she says, wait, that's why I'm here? Well, then fuck you. Kill me. That's it.
Yeah.
Because that's not, she completely has a different reaction to it. But to get there, you have to tell another story.
Mm-hmm.
To create that, there has to be another story. And one thing that I think Chandni Lakhani did early on was create this family scenario that could throw off a lot of story. The fact that on this island and the story of her wanting to get off the island. And then it was something that I could then run with as well and create there's a lot of moves to that story. Her brother, what happened, telling the guy to come steal the money so they can both get away, all these things. Now, I think where I may lose people like Andy is when I have a lot of long scenes like the one in the middle of the show with her and her father, where he's telling her to not be so angry at him. And we're talking about the mother and when the mother left. Do we need that? Strictly speaking, we do not. But for me, it adds this thing you can't quite understand until later, this emotion at the very end when you see all these people. I always knew I wanted to have them all show up in the chamber as she's dying. And it adds this whole other thing when you realize that she's unraveling her life and she's seeing she wasn't such a good person. Maybe, did she deserve to be in a hyper bar for 4 years? No, but she wasn't. The wall was full of names of people she possibly wronged or had been horrible to. And so to do that, you had to create. Now, because I was writing it while I was directing it, I'm sure it's not as efficient as it could be had I really, really got it all, which I normally do. I normally have it all done. But that's why I found myself to answer questions as I was writing. I had to have backstory to answer the question. And I gave Tony a big headache.
I'm curious. You mentioned Tony Gilroy. We've brought him up, and you also mentioned generally a number that you were given by Netflix, like broadly, like the 40 million number to work on this show. And I was wondering if you could speak to. I think 3 makes a trend. This phenomenon of you and Tony Gilroy and Steve Zalian and these people who have come up through Hollywood screenwriting, who have now found themselves as these streaming TV auteurs, for lack of a better term. Is it because this is where you can tell the stories that interest you the most, and this is the way that you've decided you wanted to tell them? Or is this something that you think, had this been available to Minority Report or Lookout era Scott Frank, you would have been like, hell yeah, I want 9 hours to tell a novelistic version of these characters? I mean, I'm curious what your take is on like the landscape where you reside.
By the way, 40 million doesn't even pay for catering and one episode of Andor.
I love the socialist Star Wars show with the fuck you catering budget.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, we're all complicit here. But,
yeah.
Yes, we are.
But Tony has a rich palate,
Yes, he does. He's a genius. So I think that I don't think there was any design to this. I think I was being told no in the world I wanted to work in. I began life, 4 decades ago wanting to write movies, period, the end. That was it. I wanted to write movies, maybe write novels later, but movies were everything for me. But increasingly, I couldn't tell the stories I wanted to tell. And then in the case of Godless, I realized after I made it, it was so much better as a limited series than it would have been because it was written as a feature. Mm-hmm. And the same thing happened with The Queen's Gambit. It was so much better as a limited series because I wanted to do that as a feature also for many, many years. But you can explore more. Now, you still have to be disciplined, which I'm not always, but you still have to be disciplined in terms of not abusing the extra time. But there are so many things that were, hitherto considered unadaptable that are now, you can do it. And it's more interesting. Now, are things stretched out and things too? Yes, of course. Monsieur Spade, which is obviously a feathered fish. It's not a this and it's not a that. It's about aging. It's about all kinds of things. It's not the mystery is one thing, but it's really about the man, and I couldn't have done that as a movie. And so I just think I fell into that. I still want to make movies. I'm trying to get Laughter in the Dark made right now, as a film, not as a limited series. Tony's in prep on a movie right now. So I think that we all still love the movies, but we go where we can get our stories told. Yeah. And most of the movies that you talked about, in particular, Out of Sight wouldn't get made today as a movie. Why? Be a Netflix streamer.
Yeah.
But so just to build on that a little bit, Godless and Queen's Gambit are beautiful expressions of features that were yearning to bust out of their cage, and this was the best venue for them. I think what's a little bit different about Department Q is that you are so expertly playing with things that are purely TV language, in my opinion, like building this misfit toy collection. Akram being a character that is so brilliantly designed, written, performed, executed, costumed. I want him to be in my life regularly, and everything about the show, while it does stand on its own, you solve this cold case, is teed up for just more and more. And I hope we get more. But you're the movie guy, Scott, and here you've given us this pure expression of TV language.
By accident, because I learned as I went. I knew it had to be a series. I knew it was unlike the others. I would have loved to have done a second season of Monsieur Spade, but definitely no one was clamoring for that. We had an idea.
No one outside of this podcast, by the way. You told us the idea. We were in.
Yeah, it's dead. But I thought that this had to be a series, and part of this was just the responsibility I felt to make it a series and to just sort of lean into. It's funny, when I wrote a Western, all I did was read Western novels for a year or so. I think we talked about that once. But for this, I really focused on watching a lot of television while I was making it, a lot of these kinds of procedurals. And it was helpful. It was really helpful.
Scott, that's about all for us, man. It's been great to hang out with you. Great to see you. Did you have one more?
I have one more only because this is a hallmark of our conversations with Scott, because you are nothing if not forthcoming with us.
Uh-oh.
You mentioned Department Q as on your to-do list, I think, many years ago. Not your last appearance.
The Scott Frank dream.
You mentioned Laughter in the Dark. That's been mentioned before. Are there any other things you'd want to just the secret out into the universe? Other projects that you're dreaming of?
Oh yeah, sure.
Books you're reading right now. Where are you? Where are we going next?
The other thing that is set up and will get made, also at Netflix and A24, is Red Harvest. I'm doing that as a limited series. Yes. Megan Abbott and I are adapting it.
Oh, you're working with Megan. That's great.
Well, we did Laughter in the Dark together.
That's
fantastic. So that's my next big limited series that I really want to do. I would love to do another season of Department Q, but they haven't as yet asked me to.
Can we talk to them? Because you heard us say this, get your head in the game, Netflix. There should be a second season coming next year, and I apologize for what that does to you in your personal life. But
it really fucks me up. But it's okay.
But is your creative feelings of ownership over this project such that if Netflix were to call you later today and say, "Okay, let's go," it has to have your full attention in order for it to happen, or is it in a place now that you feel you could once again shepherd other people? And I think
what we've learned is that I'm not good at the latter. I can shepherd other people on their projects. I'm actually pretty good, I think, at helping other people with their projects and just being a kind of mentor, producer, advisor, whatever you want to call it. When it comes to things that I'm then going to be making and doing, do you know in Butch Cassidy when they go to get the job in Bolivia, guarding the payroll for the mining, Strother Martin, they're going to work for Strother Martin. They go to Strother Martin to get the job, and he's sitting there with a plug of tobacco chewing, and he asks, the Sundance Kid, he says, can you shoot? And the Sundance Kid says, yeah, because they're going to be guarding the payroll, and he wants to see that they can shoot. And he throws a plug of tobacco on the ground, 10 feet in front of the Sundance Kid, and he says, hit that. And the Sundance Kid starts to draw both his guns, and he stops him. And he says, just one. And he draws one gun, and he shoots at the plug, and he misses it. He goes, I thought you said you could shoot. And the Sundance Kid says to him, can I move? And he says, can you move? And then he draws both his guns, and he's moving all over the place, doing all this weird shit, hitting the plug of tobacco every single time with each gun. I need to move.
Yeah.
I can't do it the way other people do it. It's just like, can I move? It's always the sort of unspoken question that I'm hoping that people understand the answer to.
Can I ask one last thing, Chris?
Of course you can.
Scott, you have been very generous about the criticisms that Tony and sometimes Steven Soderbergh have given you in your journey as a filmmaker. We'd like to just cede a little space for you to criticize Tony. Anything that maybe that you had said about Andor in passing, or just like maybe you've read the script of Behemoth and you're like, oh, second act's a little draggy. Like this is your opportunity to even the score a little bit.
This is your free hit.
Tony would say things to me like, you got to throw out that whole first episode. And if Jennifer, if my wife were there, she'd be like, Tony, what? And I would just say, wait, you have to, there's a language here. You have to parse the Tony of it. Oh my God. Those two have eaten my lunch more often than I can tell you. Tony's just lucky that he married well. That's all,
Nice one.
We feel the same way. We've been told that Susan is the one who listens to us in that
That's
household.
it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
She's our favorite Gilroy too.
Tony's too busy being Tony to listen to anybody else.
He even took over this interview. I apologize, Scott.
He even took over somehow.
But he's actually cutting the first 20 minutes of it.
Yeah, that's right. It's a little draggy. Scott, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for this show. It's really, really terrific.
Great to see you, man.
So much fun to see you guys. Really a pleasure.